to make our board meeting. Buenas tardes a todos y bienvenidos. I'm Carolina Chavez. I'm the Deputy Mayor of the City of Chula Vista, representing South County. First of all, I want to thank our board chair, Lisa Hebner, for the trust she placed in me by asking me to serve as the chair of this committee. It's truly an honor to work with all of you and to continue advancing to work and vision of this unique committee, which aims to strengthen collaboration with all our neighbors. A special thank you also goes to Supervisor Jesus Escobar for leading this group last year, navigating some challenging issues. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to our new members and advisory members. Eric Joyce, Vice Chair from North County Coastal, Katie Melendez, North County Inland, Steve Goebel, thank you for joining us, from East County, and our new advisory members, Melina Pereira, Councilmember Colleen Wallace from Riverside. Thank you for coming. Yes, I love that energy. And well, okay, we already welcome. Our new members represent North County, as I mentioned, North County Inland and East County. Okay, we're going to jump ahead. But before we move on, I'd like to ask our clerk, Francesca, to confirm if we have a quorum.
Thank you, Chair. We do have a quorum. The only voting jurisdiction that's absent today is the City of San Diego.
Okay. Also, can you also help us with the logistics for this meeting, please?
Yes, of course. Today's meeting will be held simultaneously in English and Spanish, and I'll go ahead and ask the interpreter to explain how the process works.
Good afternoon. Announcement from interpreter. To use the interpretation feature, please scroll to the bottom of the Zoom screen where the meeting controls are. Click on the interpretation icon, World, and select English as your language. If you're joining through the Zoom mobile app, cell phone, tablet, etc., please press the ellipsis, then Interpretation, and then choose your language. Finally, click on Mute Original Audio to not hear the original Spanish flow in the background. Headsets are available for interpretation. If you're in the meeting room, please check out a headset from the receptionist in the lobby. Aviso por parte del intérprete. Para hacer uso del servicio de interpretación, favor de desplazarse a la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom, donde aparecen los controles. Haga clic en el icono de interpretación, globo terráqueo, y seleccione Spanish, español. Si está utilizando la aplicación móvil de Zoom, celular, tableta, etc., presione los puntos suspensivos, luego interpretación y luego el idioma. Si no desea escuchar el audio original en inglés en el fondo, por favor seleccione Mute Original Audio, silenciar audio original. Contamos con auriculares disponibles para el servicio de interpretación. Si se encuentra en la sala de reunión, favor de pedir auriculares con la recepcionista en el vestíbulo. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I also wanted to let members of the public know we do have members of the public here in the room with us as well as on Zoom. If you are here at the meeting in person, please fill out a speaker slip in the lobby if you'd like to speak on any of the items. If you're on Zoom, please use the virtual hand raising function and I will call on you by name. If you're calling in on your phone, you will need to press *9 to raise your hand and then *6 to unmute yourself when it's your turn to speak. I'll turn it back to you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Francesca. Are there any questions from members regarding meeting procedures? No? Are there any questions from the public? Seeing none. Okay, now I would like to take a moment to acknowledge that we live and work on traditional, ancestral, and unceded land of tribal nations, including the Kumeyaay, Luiseño, Cupeño, and Coahuila peoples. Also, we share strong historical and cultural roots that unite us with our neighbors. Now, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. If you can please stand. Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, for liberty and justice for all.
Great. Moving on to the agenda. Our first item on our agenda, the non-agenda public comments.
Thank you, Chair. We do have 3 non-agenda public comments. We'll start with allegedly Audra in the room here and then go to Elizabeth Hensley on Zoom.
And I would like to keep public comments to 2 minutes.
You will put that on the timer.
Thanks for the 2 minutes. Thanks for asking a question to the public. That was interesting. You know, it's kind of sad to see what's been going on with this committee when, I mean, obviously now the border has been shut down and there's still people coming. Most of them are from Mexico and they're trying to evade Border Patrol. But what's been taking place over the last several years is quite disturbing that this committee hasn't really addressed it. And I don't know if because you guys don't see it personally, you don't really understand what was actually happening. And the fact that, you know, hundreds of thousands, and I would guarantee that it's probably 1 million children have crossed this border unaccompanied and have been trafficked throughout our nation. And right now our federal government is saying that, you know, we still can't keep track of them. This has been intentional. It's a business. Children are being sold. You can sell them over and over again. And whenever I hear you guys talk, it's always that the border's secure, and it never was. And it's really sad to see that like a humanitarian crisis can take place, because as much as you want people to come across the border and thought they're seeking asylum, that's not really the case. And so many people were raped along the way, and there's rape trees just in Jacamba. I mean, they've cleaned it up, but you know, this is something that it's sad to hear people talk like that, especially when either they know and want to do nothing about it, or they don't know and aren't willing to go and find out. I mean, because the things I saw on the border, it's really disturbing, especially the rape trees or all of the children's, you know, items that have been discarded, like even like their birth certificates, or finding a parent who was having his child, 2 daughters, travel from Ecuador to El Salvador and got a notary in New York to have them travel unaccompanied, and they wound up in the United States. So it's just sad to see that there's such suffering and traumatization of these children going on, and the exploitation of people, and a borders committee can't even address it. All you guys say is the border's secure.
Thank you. Your time has expired. Our next speaker will be Elizabeth Hensley, followed by Blair Beekman. Elizabeth, you can go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Elizabeth. I collaborate with a civil society organization based in Tijuana that promotes active mobility in the binational region. I'd like to invite members of the Borders Committee to the 15th edition of Tijuaneando in BC, which is to be celebrated in connection with Bike Anywhere on May 15th. In this case, it also coincides with the UN Global Road Safety Week, which in 2025 aims to spur action to make walking and biking safer in cities. On May 15th, we'll hold 2 activities starting at 6 a.m., where we'll mount the traditional binational pit stop in the plaza that's to the south of Ped West. We'll record information about people who passed using non-motorized transportation modes, also distributing the Bike Anywhere incentives. In the late afternoon, we're organizing a Pichicucha night at a food garden in the Zona del Rio, where city authorities and local collectives will be invited to present projects that aim to make biking and walking safer in our city. We hope to return in May to provide additional details. That's it.
Thank you very much. Our final speaker on this item will be Blair Beekman. You can go ahead.
Hi, this is Blair Beekman. Thanks a lot for your meeting today. I really like this meeting. I moved to San Diego from San Francisco Bay Area in 2022. It's nice to be around these issues and working on border issues. I've made the right move in my life. It's nice to be around. Thank you. I've been working the past 10 years in the SF area on tech accountability. The future of our data collection surveillance tech is open and clear and understandable and trusting. And we are entering a new administration, and when that happens, they often try new tricks, new gadgets, new gimmicks to see how things can work. I think, it was already being put into place, new ALPR and surveillance tech in San Diego County and in cities and counties throughout California, in fact, on the state level from Governor Newsom. That project and programs is starting to come into fruition, and they're starting to really move on it. We have to be aware of that And we really have to ask for the process to be accountable in the future of this new tech being placed in our local communities. You're doing great work with public safety. I mean, we've cleaned up crime and things like that, but you're still not making the process open and accountable in how we talk about the tech being placed. You're keeping that secret and private. That's not the future. That's not sustainability. We really have to work on openness. There's a whole future of biometric camera work that's starting to enter the regular, park systems of City of San Diego, the senior centers. Those conversations have to be open and clear, and we can't fear having those conversations openly. We really have to be working on this, on how to be open and clear about it and not fear these open conversations in the public meeting space. Good luck how we can do that. I hope these words can be of help towards that.
That concludes the public comments.
Thank you. Okay, so at this point on the agenda, and since this is the time for member comments, I'd like to take the opportunity to remind everyone that with this meeting, we're returning to our regular scheduled meeting on the fourth Friday of each month through now starting at 1:30 p.m. Also, since this is our first regular meeting of the year, February's meeting was a special one. I'd like to briefly share that from the international border, we have many important issues that we've been addressing over the past few months, such as the cross-border sewage issue and the progress of Otay Mesa East Port of Entry. But there are also important matters for interregional borders that need attention. And in this meeting, we will address some of those. Before moving on, do any of the members would like to make comments? Seeing none. Okay, let's move to item number 2. This item is a consent item and it requires action to move forward. Would someone move the motion to approve our consent item on our agenda, please? Still moved by Supervisor Joel Anderson. Do I have second by Kitty Melendez from North County? So,
Chair, if we could take public comment before the vote, please.
okay.
We do have 2 public comments on consent. Allegedly, Audra will be first, followed by Blair Beekman.
I want to talk about the Border Climate Adaptation Environmental Justice Plan. Not only with the invasion was there significant impacts to the environment from people just dropping trash all along the border, which is pretty disturbing that, we have all these environmental plans, but that doesn't get addressed. It's like, it's all right, because at this point, by now, it's kind of being covered up by the weather and the environment kind of, having it disappear into the earth, which is really sad. But then when we're talking about doing business with Mexico, it's interesting because Mexico doesn't have the same regulations as the United States does as far as smog goes. So when we're on the border like that and you're expecting there to be some kind of like plexiglass that's keeping their pollution from coming into here, and if they don't have regulations, but they're driving into our nation, but the people that live here are actually being penalized and, punished for the, greenhouse gases, it seems pretty negligent not to address the fact that many of these people, probably millions of them a day, are coming in and affecting the greenhouse gases that you guys want to mitigate. But we don't talk to them about that because you guys always are concerned about doing business with them and the billions of dollars of commerce that comes into our nation. That's nice and all, but when you're going to penalize the people that actually live here for driving, it's disturbing that we can do business with an entity that doesn't have any regulations like we do, yet we have to jump through all the hoops to make sure that we're in compliance. But we never talk about Mexico like they need to be in compliance too. So I don't know if you need to bring a fee for the people that aren't smog to come across to mitigate their carbon footprint. But if you're going to do it to us, it needs to be equitable because it's pretty ridiculous that we can, look at us and magnify it when that's a huge issue that needs to be addressed.
Thank you. Your time has expired. Our next speaker will be Blair Beekman. You can go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Blair Beekman. You're approving the meeting minutes from November 22nd, 2024. Kind of interesting. For that meeting, you talked about Indian Energy Zero Emissions Vehicle Ring issues. I don't quite understand what this is about, but to quickly offer, I've been learning that Guadalajara, Mexico, they use electric buses for a lot of their public transport. I haven't heard stories about their buses exploding or anything. I wonder if it's a good program, and I'm sure we all have great stories about Guadalajara, Mexico, what they do towards the future of public transit and community. Good luck in looking into this matter as necessary. And to mention border climate, San Ysidro Mobility Hub and Blue Line Transit-oriented development project updates. I've been a real strong proponent asking about the importance of the ideas of how we can work towards tech accountability in the future of our border issues and toll-taking issues and such. There's going to be a lot of biometric camera tech involved with that. To have clear conversations with Mexico, to work out good plans, and then to share those plans with the public and make it a full community process of just not Mexico and the U.S., but the community on both sides as well, adding to that conversation, allowing that conversation to be a full conversation. That's key. And that's the kind of stuff that's what our future is about. That's sustainability. So good luck in working towards that. I mean, we have the ideas to do that. We just have to learn how to practice them now. So good luck how we can do that. Like I said, biometric tech is really coming on, and they're using it to data collect. They're starting to arrest people with that knowledge and understanding, is my understanding. So we have to be mindful, and people are.
Thank you. Your time has expired. That concludes the public comments on consent.
There we go. Now I would like to ask if any are we taking a vote now or, okay, perfect. So okay, please vote. This is mine? I think this is mine. Okay. City of San Diego.
That motion passes unanimously with those members present.
Okay. So continuing with this, do any board members have any comments? No, we're good? Okay. At this time, I'd like to request our CEO, Mario Orso, for his report.
Okay,
Thank you,
thank you, Chair. Several things are happening. For this committee, we recently traveled to Mexico City to give an update to both the Ministry of the Treasury Department and the Foreign Relations Ministry on Otay Mesa East. As part of the discussions was floating the idea of considering setting up a trust fund with some of the revenues collected on Mexico side from the tolls of Otay 2 or Otay Mesa East to address environmental issues, including the Tijuana River. Those are we just planted the seed, the idea. It was taken very well by the Treasury Department as well as the Ministry of Foreign Relations. That doesn't mean that it's a done deal, but it's part of the conversations and it's the part of carrying those bilateral discussions. From a project updates, the board approved the draft 2026 fiscal year 26 draft budget. It is a snapshot of the information that we have right now from financing. As we know, there are grants I sent to the board, a list of grants that are being held for the grant agreements by DOT. That we're hoping, we're already having conversations with DOT between Caltrans, North County Transit for both the infra grants that we got there. So things are moving, but it is a snapshot of the reality that we know today. Things are fluid, and we will continue updating the budget. Also, the board will be taking a discussion during this entire year about prioritizing projects. So that's going to require potential budget amendments. So it is very encouraging that we were able to get the draft budget moving, because we need to have a timetable in May that we need to submit an approved budget to the state in order to continue the funding, the flow of funds coming to the agency. And again, the budget is focused on the fundamentals and strategic spending ideas. From another project update is the California-Baja California Border Resiliency Plan, which is what we call the Border Master Plan for the Environment. This was with a grant that we got from Caltrans. The goal is to the plan is to address the environmental concerns in the border region. Proposed plan will also identify strategies, programs, and projects to protect the transportation infrastructure and vulnerable communities along the California-Mexico border. This includes water quality also in the plan. Like I mentioned, SANDAG received the grant from Caltrans, and we're working jointly on this. Toll operations, we're continued to have as a target this coming summer, to have our back office, our new back office system into operations. We did share with the board previously that we had some compatibility issues with Orange County Transportation Authority, OCTA, on the I-15, on some of the tolls. There were some of the vehicles that had tags from Orange County traveling portions of I-15. We did report this to the California Toll Operations Committee, which oversees the entire statewide tolling software. And, the issue was nominal, but it was important to highlight and to correct, which has been corrected. Also on the LOSAN, the board approved 4 proposed rail alignments for the environmental document study on the LOSAN realignment. So that's going to allow us to pursue a notice of preparation and start on that journey, on that project, for within a year or 2 years, release a draft environmental document. I do want to remind everybody, May 15 is Bike Anywhere Day. If somebody wants to register, please go to the SANDAG webpage. And as with mixed feelings, today, this Borders Committee will mark the closure of the SANDAG 401B building. This is the very last meeting SANDAG is holding in this building. The next meetings is going to be on on our new building that's called West, next to the courthouse at Broadway. But this is it. This is the very last meeting, a SANDAG committee, policy working group, any SANDAG function is happening today. Borders Committee is the very last meeting after 35 years of being in this building. That concludes my report.
Wow. I remember in 2013, I was sitting in the audience for this exact committee meeting and the board of directors. And look how full circle this is, right? What an honor. Thank you so much to our chair, to our CEO, Mario, also for his leadership and for this very informative update. And well, moving on, I'd like to welcome Brian Lane and Emily Doss, both from SANDAG, and Stacy Bishop from MTS. They will be presenting updates on several transit initiatives connecting our region's borders, including the new MTS overnight bus route from the border to downtown San Diego, near-term solutions for airport transit connections, and 3 rapid bus routes. Brian, Emily, Stacy, take it away.
I just want to, before Brian begins, they're going to talk about several projects, but the importance of the after-hours service that MTS is providing is huge. When we were having conversations with the airport authority of how we're going to get transit to them, the CEO told me, Mario, it is important to get our customers, but you know what is more important? I need to get my employees to the airport, and they begin their shifts at 3 and 4 a.m. and there's no transit. So this tells you how valuable this service is. That's also thinking, you can have the coolest operation or place where to go, but if you don't have no employees, it ain't gonna happen. So that's just a good example. So I'm gonna pass it on, Brian. Sorry for the interruption.
I expected as much. Thank you. And thank you, Chair, and thank you, committee members. Just quickly, before I turn it over to Stacy, I think we heard from borders from last year and the last couple of years that how come we never hear about transit? And then how come you're not also just considering the other borders around our region? While the Mexico border is important, there are, 4 other borders that we kind of call. And, why can't you start bringing some items? And so we put together this presentation to kind of give you a flavor of some of the transit things that are happening in the region, not only at the southern border. And like Mario said, what's going on with the overnight trips from the border into the airport is very important. And so Emily will kind of touch on that. But I'll hand it over to Stacy from MTS to talk about the new service that they have. And again, it's really exciting what they have. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, committee members, for having me again. My name is Stacy Bishop. I'm the manager of marketing and communications for MTS, and excited to be here to talk to you about Route 910. Route 910 is actually our first overnight express service that MTS has operated, so it's a milestone for our agency as well. So as we jump in, we're going to start by talking about our Blue Line trolley. Hopefully everyone is well familiar with that. It is not only the workhorse of the MTS system, but actually when we look at nationwide, the Blue Line really stands out in terms of light rail ridership across the country. So locally, it carries about 80,000 people per day. We've seen a huge increase in ridership, obviously, since the Mid-Coast extension in 2021. The Blue Line represents about 2/3 of our light rail ridership. It's averaging over 2.1 million trips a month through this fiscal year so far, and that is about 1/3 of the entire MTS bus and trolley system. So you can see how vital it is. MTS for light rail ridership in the country is number 2, second only to LA. But the Blue Line itself, we also think that it would be a number 5 system on its own in the entire country. We think that it may be the second highest individual line in the country as well. So it's not just in in San Diego, but also across the nation that it stands out. A lot of that is obviously due to the uniqueness of serving an international border with that service. And so to speak to that, you can see when we look at Blue Line boardings, that the vast majority of them are happening at the San Ysidro Transit Center. And so 42% of Blue Line ridership happens at San Ysidro. It represents 1 in every 5 trolley trips starts or ends at San Ysidro. And, about 10% of all MTS trips start or end again at San Ysidro. So it's a huge hub for the region. And so when we look at that boarding on the trolley, one of the things that is unique as we were planning the overnight express service is that the most popular Blue Line trips are that very first trip in the morning, which is about 4:15 a.m. They're packed. We often have riders that are further north actually riding a southbound trip just to take the northbound trip back because capacity is so high there that oftentimes if you just wait for the northbound trip, you can't get on. So there's really, really high demand. And so obviously with that begs the question, we hear it all the time, well, why don't you just run Blue Line service 24/7? And if we would, we could, trust me. But we actually share part of our Blue Line tracks with heavy freight overnight from 1 to 4 a.m. And there are federal limitations on being able to operate light rail service with heavy freight. So as you can see here, this is one of the freight services that uses our tracks in those early morning hours. It's quite bigger than our light rail line, and so FTA does have limitations about vehicles being in such different weight capacities operating on the same tracks. So that is the answer why. So when we started looking at this, we were doing some survey outreach to riders, community partners, individual riders at transit centers, online, to talk about this service when we started planning. And so some of the background data, just for comparison, is people who are transit riders that were expected to use this service. About 60% of those riders said that during those times they're using a personal vehicle or a rideshare service. So a lot of individual vehicle trips being taken during those hours because transit service isn't available. And when you add in people who just don't travel at all because there's no transit service, it's about 75% of respondents. When you can see about expected ridership, it was really evenly split between people that would be using it multiple times a week versus people who would ride it infrequently. But so we were just trying to gather some initial data on how people might expect to use the route, as well as which stops they would like to be served by that. So overwhelmingly, our main hub, 12th and Imperial in downtown San Diego, was overwhelmingly the service people wanted to see. And then you can see it was kind of spread out there throughout South San Diego, National City, and downtown. So in addition to looking at what the community was telling us they wanted to see served, we also looked at ridership itself and late night, early morning trips on the Blue Line as it was available. And so one of the things that's different from this chart than the previous chart is that, some of our stops in Barrio Logan and Harborside were less reported on the rider survey side, but actually when we look at trips, we're really popular. And so you'll see how that plays into what the service ended up being. So you can kind of see that box highlights some of the key ridership stations for us. And so this is one of those stations. This is Harborside. So this is people coming northbound, and this is Harborside by the shipyards. So there's a lot of military personnel, military contractors that get off at this station. NASCO is a huge partner for us with our employee pass program. And so even though riders weren't self-reporting that they would use Harborside and Barrio Logan as frequently, we knew that there was demand based on ridership patterns. And so as we got into determining the final stops, we decided to do a limited stop service due to travel times. So right now the Route 910 Express is fairly competitive with the Blue Line trolley. And we wanted to keep key stations from both the survey data and again, what our actual ridership shows us. So San Ysidro and Iris were very clear we needed service there. And then in Chula Vista, we chose Palomar due to the freeway access and higher ridership levels. And then 24th Street had higher demand for service in National City. And then like was mentioned, we're serving 2 stops in Barrio Logan and then throughout our downtown stations. So the final schedule when it launched at the end of January is that trips are running every 30 minutes. We did put extra standby buses out there at the start of service. We were particularly nervous, to be honest with you, that those early morning trips were going to be way over capacity. So we do run articulated buses on the route. They have capacity for 60 people seated, but up to 80 or 90 max capacities. And so the trips run every 30 minutes. It's again 36 minutes from San Ysidro to the main transfer center at 12th and Imperial. Again, that's 2 minutes slower than the trolley, so it is really competitive to the light rail line. And from a scheduling perspective, it was a bit of a puzzle piece since it's spread over 2 service days and calendar days, but so far so good. So this is how we're looking. This is about just under 2 months of ridership. So this is last updated as of about 2 weeks ago. And so when we started service, we were averaging weekday ridership just under 150 daily ridership. That has since climbed now over 200 trips. So some of the peak trips are seeing about 40 passengers. So still quite not at capacity. So we'll talk about next steps next. But we are seeing, about a 33% increase over the first 6-ish weeks or so of data. It's no surprise that the vast majority of trips are coming to and from the San Ysidro Transit Center. So about 85% of our trips where people are boarding are at San Ysidro. And then as far as when we look at on-offs is what we call them. When we look at offs, about half of people are getting off in downtown San Diego, about 20% at those Barrio Logan stations, 20% at Iris, and then another about 10% in National City. And then you can see, sorry, it's really small over here, but when you look at, again, the most popular trip times, so unsurprisingly, the most popular northbound trips are actually 2 trips before the first trolley. So it's around 3:45 a.m. That is seeing the highest ridership currently, followed by that first 4:07 a.m. trip. So again, people that would not be able to use trolley service in that early morning. And then the most popular southbound trip again is just after midnight, again after trolley services departed. And we just didn't have data for some of those middle trips. So that's why you see empty bar graphs. It's not because no one is on board. So what's next? So we know safety came up quite a bit when we were talking about this. We do have dedicated security staff to this route, as well as 24/7 security dispatch, but we're also putting in more lighting at stops in Barrio Logan from a safety measure. So we're doing a solar lighting pilot project at MTS and have included these stops as part of that. We are going to do some more widespread promotion of the route over the next month or so. So as was mentioned, we had kind of focused on internal communication strategies, really targeting riders, some limited digital communications and advertisements because we didn't want to induce more demand than we could handle in those early morning trips. But now that we've been able to see that we have quite a bit of capacity still on the route, we will be doing some cross-border ads at digital billboards near the border, some Spanish radio stations, and so we'll be promoting this service more on a broader scale. We're also going to be doing surveying of riders on the route in May. Like we said, this is a wholly unique service for MTS, and so we're eager to learn from the riders themselves in terms of where they're going, how they're using the route, what their trip purpose is for, how they commuted before, as part of our just overall analysis of the pilot, because we will have to bring this back to our board for approval for continuation at the end of the year. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions and turn it over to my SANDAG colleagues. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Stacy. Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Doss. I'm an Associate Regional Planner with SANDAG, and I'm here today to share about the airport transit connection and our near-term solutions. At SANDAG, we refer to airport transit connection as the ATC, so you'll hear me use that acronym throughout the presentation. So with a regional central mobility hub no longer consideration, our priority is connecting the airport to the regional transit network. Our current advanced planning and conceptual engineering study is looking at the transit link only. An ATC will link existing options when complete, connecting commuter and passenger rail, light rail, next-gen rapid bus, and local buses. Existing heavily used rail transit hubs, Old Town Transit Center and the Santa Fe Depot are potential key connection points for the ATC. And connecting via Santa Fe Depot ensures transit riders coming from South County and beyond the border will be able to access the ATC. And we'll also need to ensure that rail and bus services connecting to both hubs are both frequent and reliable, so they may support an airport transit connection and greater regional transit connectivity as a whole. In an analysis of San Diego International Airport employee origins, we found that over 55% of employees live in south and central subregions of San Diego County, meaning that a south ATC connection would be a great benefit to these employees, as Mario had mentioned earlier. Later this year, we will also be publishing the Airport Travel Survey Report, which will include data on the airport's travelers and employees' origins and destinations. More to come on this. In the last several years, various modes have been identified for the airport transit connection, and each has a mix of opportunities and challenges. There's no silver bullet when it comes to the ATC. The automated people mover is commonly used to connect between airport terminals, and some cities extend the service off airport property to connect to transit, like in Oakland. Automation can help reduce operations expenses. Challenges for the APM include, for the APM in San Diego specifically, include new technology to operate in the region, and there's no entity identified right now to operate this service. We cannot integrate as seamless with trolley as it would require a trolley transfer. And it requires the region to site and build a dedicated maintenance and storage facility, which adds to project cost. Because it must be built in dedicated right-of-way, this also adds to costs and other complexities. The trolley is an existing and familiar transit system in San Diego with the current operator, MTS. Frequency, capacity dependent, and capacity dependent on broader system operations. It has the potential to extend the existing light rail system and provide access to new destinations, and could be greater potential for a no transfer transit experience. And there'd be no need to build a new maintenance and storage facility, at least in the constrained urban core for now. Challenges with the trolley concept is interlining or sharing track with other trolley services. While operating on street, a new trolley line could add to at-grade crossing conflicts with cars, pedestrians, and more. And we have to consider service frequency limitations when comparing against existing trolley lines, comparing what frequencies existing trolley lines aim to achieve in the next 25 years. The bus, like MTS Route 992 and the San Diego Flyer, they can be convenient and a reliable option when provided priority treatments like dedicated bus lanes, as more of our regional and local plans are envisioning, such as the recently adopted Port Master Plan update. Challenges with the enhanced bus service option include delays caused by vehicle traffic when bus lanes aren't implemented, or impossible certain stretches of the road, potential continued driver shortages, and rider willingness to use a bus or shuttle compared to the rail options. So we like to call our Route 992 and our airport shuttle ATC today. They're the two transit options servicing the airport. The 992 connects downtown and runs about every 15 minutes, and the Flyer connects the Old Town Transit Center and runs about every 20 minutes. Stacy shared about the new Night Owl Express earlier, and I'd also like to mention that MTS also recently updated the 992 timetables to ensure that departures from downtown were in alignment with Night Owl arrivals for folks traveling to the airport very early in the morning. Whether or not the bus is identified as a long-term ATC project mode, we need to think about what we can do in collaboration with our partner agencies to provide a better bus connection to the airport near term, such as increased frequency for the 992 and the Flyer. Midterm, we could design and implement those bus priority lanes I mentioned on North Harbor Drive and Pacific Highway in order to ensure buses headed to and from the airport and all sorts of other shuttles taking people to various urban core destinations have a top-notch, traffic-free experience. Our team has been hard at work studying these near-term improvements. SANDAG's public affairs goal is to ensure the region is well-informed, lead the process for facilitating public engagement, and secure funding for the project. Our public affairs tactics align with key project milestones to ensure we meet our public affairs goal and project requirements. Last fall, we focused on updating and maintaining dialogues with our internal stakeholders, like our board of directors, transportation committee, mobility working group, and external partner agency board of directors. In 2025, as the project team begins paring down the concepts for ATC, the public affairs efforts will focus on collecting feedback through polling and targeted community group meetings. This year, the public affairs effort will also focus on collecting feedback and promoting the interim bus connections to the new Terminal 1 at the airport as well. And now I will pass it on to Brian to talk about BRT.
All right. Thank you, Emily. So back in October of 2023, the Board of Directors approved a budget amendment to fund some planning work on 6 rapid routes in the region. And we've been moving forward on that a little slowly, trying to get the procurement of planning consultants going. But this is a big study, and it's taken a while to get moving, but we are now finally getting to move forward on this. And we've had some public outreach meetings that have been really fun to hear from some of the public on. But what we're presenting to the public as we talk about each of these 6 rapid routes is kind of what we're doing in the short term for these projects, and then what we plan to do in the long term with them. Short term wise, these projects will get us through the design and engineering, and we're looking to get through 15% design and engineering on this, prepare the environmental document identification, not the actual environmental work, so we can then move on to phase 2 and actually hopefully do some of that environmental work and get us into 30% kind of design. This is the work we're just starting to kick off right now, and we'll be doing over the next year or 2. Also, as part of that budget amendment, it include a deep dive into rapid technology, and I'll talk a little bit more about what that could kind of look like. But our technology team here has hired a consultant to do a region-wide look at what all the jurisdictions in the region are willing to work with us on in terms of technology. And buses really are using all kinds of technology, cloud-based, GPS-type based technologies that provide them quicker access through signals and things like that. Another component of this work that the board approved the budget on was a public outreach component. And so we have a separate team that will be working on that to ensure that the public outreach is coordinated between the 2 projects that we're working on with the rapid works. And then as we move through the next couple of years, get these 6 routes throughout the region. So making sure that we're coordinated and can really reach out to folks. A lot of that outreach will include CBO support from our stakeholders that we work with at our Social Equity Working Group, doing stakeholder meetings, pop-up events, tons of surveys, and continuing like the outreach meetings that we're doing this month. And then all this is kind of to ensure that we're ensuring our eligibility to apply for capital grants. The federal capital and grant improvement program has very strict regulations on the types of things you can apply for and what needs to be included in that. And so as we're moving through this process, assuming that there's not major changes in that grant program, and there hasn't been in the last 10 years or so, even through various administrations, we can be ready to jump on those. And of these 6 routes, the ones that are most successful and that could move forward into that capital grant applications, we have basically crossed our T's and dotted our I's at this point. So when we do apply for those, we're ready to move forward. Turn my mic off. So as I mentioned before, what we'll be looking at in the next couple of years and talking to the public about and working closely with our jurisdictions. We've already met with all the most of the planning and engineering staff at the jurisdictions who are making sure that their bosses and their electeds, some of you are as part of the collaboration process, is what are the kind of transit priority measures that we can incorporate for each of these routes throughout the region. And it varies widely. Even our existing rapid routes out there today have a bunch of different types of priority measures. The one on the far left is a shared bus bike lane. We're using that today on El Cajon Boulevard. It's been a good model of a quick build type of a program where you can just get the paint out there and have the bus and bike share. Not everywhere in the region or in the country is this the ideal situation, because bus drivers don't always like to be behind a bike, and I'm sure the bicyclist doesn't want a bus right behind them either, but in certain areas it has worked very well. Another thing is a managed lane. On the I-15 today, we have those managed lanes, and 3 of our bus routes are using those today. It's a great way to get buses to bypass traffic, and when they're already there or when we're planning managed lanes in the future, it's the type of thing ideally we would be able to use. Queue jump lanes in the middle, we do have a couple of those around the county today already that transit are able to use, but at those congested signals, giving that bus that ability to jump ahead of that congested traffic and get out up to that next bus stop ahead of the traffic. Transit signal priority, and that's what I kind of mentioned. This is where the technology piece is, and this is why we have a whole separate contract to work with our jurisdictions and the public to talk about is what is the future of this today. are coming up. Right now, MTS and NTD both use TSP. It's already even old, being only 10, 15 years old. There already are new methods to do this, but a lot of jurisdictions around the country are using this cloud-based TSP to enable buses to move through the traffic and get green signals ahead of them. It helps the flow of traffic for both cars out there as well as buses and other high occupancy vehicles. And so that's why we've heard from a bunch of jurisdiction staff and electeds is, really make sure that TSP is a big component of your rapid work. And then level and all-door boarding is just a great way to speed up that time when you do pull up to a stop and you're loading the passengers on and off. When you have that all-door boarding and level, you can just get them on fairly quickly. And successful bus rapid transits around the country are able to use things like that. I keep hitting the wrong button. So we have 3 routes that are connecting to our borders, and 3 of the 6, and I thought I'd just kind of highlight each of those 3. The first one is the Rapid 640, and so this is kind of similar to what Stacy was talking about with the the OWL service that they're doing on the MTS route. We'll be proposing this route. It's a very similar, but this would operate throughout the daylight hours, and then also have to operate on the I-5 during congestion. So MTS for the OWL service doesn't have to worry about congestion at all between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. and didn't have to think about that. But as part of this work, working with MTS and our jurisdiction stakeholders in this area, is how can we get this bus to move quickly from the border to downtown? We've been hearing that a lot of folks would want some faster version of the Blue Line than is out there today, because the Blue Line stops at every one of those stops. And while it's one of the best light rail systems in the world, it is slow if you're wanting to go a longer distance. And they've been asking for some sort of express version. So this route has been a popular one. We're going to do a public outreach meeting next Wednesday night for this one, just the initial one, to reach out and ask folks, hey, this route's coming. Where would you like to see it stop? Where are you really trying to go downtown or in the barrio area? Where are you coming from in the southern portion? And then that'll help us when we do kick off our planning. The next route is the route 688, Rapid 688. We call this the Purple Line precursor. It's very similar corridor area as that Purple Line light rail transit that we proposed in the last couple of regional plans. This route has also been very popular and asked for, can you get this route sooner than later? This would start at the border and go up to 805, stopping at a few places along the way. Ideally, we could go to the new SDSU West, Mission Valley stop over there, and then stop near Kearney Mesa and head over up into the UCSD UTC area. This one, again, is been widely popular. Cecily, my coworker, who you're going to hear from on the next item, has been working on the Purple Line in this route, and folks have really been asking for this route to come out sooner than later as well. And then lastly, and here's where we're not always focusing on the southern border, here's a route that's hitting into Riverside, and this one's been talked about a lot from our folks up in North County, is, can we provide something from our folks who have to commute from Temecula down to the North County, or even those I met a city staffer at Temecula who lives in the city of Vista and has to commute the other way. And so he's even looking and excited about a route like this. But this route would stop. We're not sure about Temecula. We've just started meeting with them, met with the public on that one a couple of weeks ago. Where it would actually stop in Temecula we'll find out in the next year or so as we work through this planning. Would Murrieta, Hemet, or Lake Elsinore be ideal locations? We're not sure. That's what we'll kind of figure out with this. But, we do know that the folks down at CSU San Marcos and Palomar College and the hospitals in North County have also been asking for some sort of connection to the Riverside area, something to beat the traffic on the I-15. And so that's what this route would do. This will be a fun one as well, because right now on the I-15, there's no managed lanes yet. Those in the regional plan and Caltrans idea of those are probably not until the 2040s or so to be built. So it's kind of far out there, but we'd like to get this route sooner than later, obviously. And so maybe bus on shoulders, kind of like what we're doing on our route that's on the 805, might be a great way to get around those areas of traffic that are out there today. So, and then a lot of folks have been asking in our public meetings, like when will this route actually start? And so all of these are still dependent on funding for construction and operations. But we really do hope to start and get some of these out sooner than later. Right now we're doing the studying portion of it, but then we have to start finalizing the route alignments, doing the environmental impacts, things like that, secure the funding, work through design and construction, and then actually operate. It takes a couple of years to buy vehicles no matter what. So even if we wanted to put these out tomorrow, we had the funding, it would still take a couple of years to get extra vehicles, MTS or NCTD or Riverside Transit to hire the drivers for it and get it going. If we want to build a lot of great things on it, depending on the construction cost and all of that, then it might take a couple more years to do all the design, environmental, things like that. But as soon as 2029, these could be out there going and in an operation. So with that, we have our contact information for our emails for both the ATC and Rapid projects. They have great websites, and we appreciate your time today and welcome any questions.
First, I want to open it up. First, I want to thank you for this very important information, and I want to open it up for public comment. Francesca, do we have any public comment?
Thank you, Chair. We do. We have two public commenters. Allegedly, Audra will be up first, followed by Blair Beekman.
So many things to say. It's interesting that you're just now looking at other borders. It's like weird that we focus on Mexico because it feels like a lot of this stuff you're doing for Mexico. To have the people come here, especially when you're saying you want to make sure that those across the border can access ATC. What about the people here? I feel like, you should maybe make public transit available at all hours if you want people to be taking this kind of transit, because otherwise you're impeding their ability to get around. And I'm wondering what that AI camera was in that video, because it was like, had a blue box around the people. That's some kind of smart technology we need to be mindful of, because it's really out there to track and trace people. And I'm wondering, with your surveys in May for the riders, how are you going to accomplish that? Are you expecting people to actually stop while they're on the way to go somewhere to give you guys input? A lot of times we spend a lot of money on surveys and it's really not worth the money. And it's interesting when you are talking about all of this new transit, you never talk about bathrooms. That is something that if you want people to take this kind of transit, you need to make it conducive. So if they have to go to the bathroom, especially the workers, like this is something that has been brought up on a massive scale at MTS. Even here, you guys were talking at the board of directors the last time about bringing in some kind of hub downtown, but it's like there's transit all over the place. And if you want to go to the bathroom, it's like you got to make sure you know where you're going. So, that's something that needs to be part of your priorities, to make sure that you're providing something. And I just feel like you don't. Because there's even, businesses that will put, advertisements on it. So you can actually make money from having these things out there, just like you could for a seat, one of the benches that you guys would put for somebody to sit there. So I just think you guys need to be more mindful of that, because that is a health issue.
Thank you. Our final speaker on this item will be Blair Beekman. You can go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Blair Beekman. Really nice words from DRA on that last item. She gave a very nice list of things to be working on and considering. Thank you. For me, if we can be more clear and trusting how to talk about the actual tech being placed, to me, that's 3/4 of the battle, that we don't have to keep those conversations hidden, secretive, for it to be regular and open. The conversations about our tech placement and what exactly is the tech, what sort of policies the tech has, that's the goal, and an important goal. There's more involved, but that's an important step that we don't know how to do very well, that we really have to practice for our future of sustainability, good oversight, good transparency. It's just our future. It's not a future of hiding things and making things a continual state of war. It's practicing open democracy as concepts of peace. The two work together, and we have to acknowledge that. Good luck on those efforts. I heard a lot on this item. In the past few months, we've been working a lot on the ideas of what is the future of the airport transportation going to be like? And a very nice thing has arisen where people are saying using the bus system, creating rapid transit system buses is actually a good thing. It does a good thing, and it's a safe thing, and it does things well. And we shouldn't be negating that and discounting it and not giving it much credit. Thank you that that's been around, and I hope for acknowledging that openly and clearly in how we'll be deciding the future of these airport projects. It looks like I don't understand the depth of what you went into today, but I don't better understand it. But it sounds like you went through a lot, and you're going through some important steps right now. Good luck how you can work on these future of airport issues, and that rapid transit can be okay. Thank you.
That concludes the public comments.
And before I open it up to the members, I want to mention a few things. I am very in love with this project. 2 years ago, sitting at the board of directors of MTS, and before that, working for Councilmember Whitburn on D3, I got to see the very business side of this district and understand a lot of issues. We have to be mindful that we have over 100,000 people coming across the border, U.S. citizens, legal residents that are our workforce. And after 11:30 p.m., we don't have anything going southbound. And that's a conversation we had, our board member, Steve Goebel, and myself with other board members on MTS, that we need to have common sense, first and foremost. We're bringing all this workforce north, and after 11:30, what are they doing? We want to promote ridership. The Blue Line, is it correct, 2.1 million trips a month?
Yes, that's about what we're averaging through the first 8 months of this fiscal year.
And that brings a very important point. This region produces, right? Revenue, workforce. We can't house our workers. Hello, right? We haven't done a good enough job to create housing for our workforce, so they have to look for jobs elsewhere. The least we can do is provide public transportation, right? So I want to refer this, before I open it up to the board members, I want to refer this presentation to the board of directors, because I think it's crucial that they understand what the Blue Line does and how much it produces, how much of a workforce it transports, students, tourism, et cetera. If it's okay with you, CEO, I want the board of directors to see this presentation, and I would like the Transportation Committee to also look at this very, very important presentation.
Yeah, we'll bring it up with Chair Hibner and put it in the agenda if she approves for her consideration. But we'll bring it up to her.
Thank you so much. And I had the pleasure and honor of cutting the ribbon with my MTS colleagues in January at the Palomar Station for this very important route that I know it's going to be a holistic solution for many, many people. And we're going to promote more ridership. So we need to invest more in the Blue Line. That's the message. So thank you. And with that, I'm going to open it up for our board members. Board member comments? Go ahead.
I want to
Thank
thank
you.
you for that. I'm into transportation and I like what you're doing because I need you guys to come and help us to get it from Riverside or LA all the way down to the Coachella Valley. So I really appreciate this. Woo! I like this. I like this.
Katie Melendez.
Thank you, Chair. Really appreciate this presentation. I think that it's great to have a first look at it and hope that the full board would be able to see some of these initiatives. Definitely want to say big yes to bus rapid transit going to Riverside and coming back to San Diego. It's clear we have a lot of commuters coming from Riverside towards North County, where I'm representing, and all the way through San Diego. I did have a question about the operations of such a line. Because the volume of commuters is really dominant towards traveling south, how does that impact the bus operations, right? Would there be more routes and more, opportunities to travel south versus north from San Diego to Riverside?
Yeah, we'll get into the weeds of that data. We'll get more data once we get our consultants on board. We already kind of know that most people are going south in the mornings, north in the afternoons, right? But there is a reverse, but we want to really get into that because right now we have the rapid expresses that come from Escondido, Poway, downtown. They only run in the mornings, just southbound, and then in the afternoons, only northbound in the afternoons. This route in the regional plan right now, we have it running both directions all day. I think 15 minutes in the morning, 30 minutes during the middle of the day. Whether that's what we actually propose for this route, we're not sure. We'll get into the data, see what the commute patterns are, what people want. Ideally, it would run both ways. Well, if depending on how many buses you run south in the morning, you may have to send some of them north anyways to send another one south. So you'd already be going north. But yeah, I think there still is a demand for going the other way. So they probably would be going both ways.
Okay, definitely appreciate that. The ideal situation is running all ways, but perhaps more attainable to respond to commuter demand. And then I also really appreciate the presentation on transit priority measures. There's a lot of initiatives here that I think we can implement. And then one additional item that came to mind that's relevant for our jurisdiction is grade separation. So in the city of Vista, we are currently researching grade separation of our Sprinter line along Vista Transit Center area, along Vista Village, because that is the same area where the Sprinter is traveling, our Breeze bus system is traveling, and it really does obstruct the bus route to have the Sprinter line level at street level with the buses. And so I'm sure there's other places around the county that are obstructed by transit lines, and buses and transit hopefully can work together a little bit more with some grade separation considerations. Those are definitely larger initiatives than some of what was outlined here, but I definitely see there's an opportunity for transit priority via grade separation in some areas. So those are my comments.
I do appreciate that, Deputy Mayor Melendez. We also have that necessity in Chula Vista, especially with the largest project in the nation being built at our bayfront. We're going to need it. Traffic impacts and just safety as well. Anyone else have?
Oh, I'm sorry. One more thing, if I could,
Go right
could
ahead.
add. I wanted to refer to the transit signal priority, the technology. I know that our jurisdiction has recently improved our technology for our first responders, and we're having conversations about how similar technology can be used for bus routes that come through our city. So I would just want to encourage all the jurisdictions in the other cities that the technology that we use for more efficient transportation could also be used to enhance, the movement of our first responders too.
Agreed. Anyone else have any comments? Go ahead.
Thank you so much for the presentation. It is like a waterfall of new information, so we appreciate it. We can feel like in a different county sometimes up in Oceanside. So it is great to learn about the amazing work that you're doing to connect our communities. I want to second our chair's comments about the importance of both economic and just cultural relevance of being a cross-border community that we share all the way through Oceanside and even further to the north. So it's a tremendous value to continue to keep us connected. I appreciate the previous board's insistence on bringing transit into this committee space to have this conversation because, as you know, it's literally moving people around is the best way that we can stay connected and bumping into each other. So I appreciate, again, the information. Just to comment on the airport connections, I think it's that old truism that we see. Sometimes the simplest ways end up being the best ways, even though we would wish for the shiny new. Can you expand upon a little bit? What do you think you said that possibly a downside with the bus being the connection could impact people's willingness to take it? Can you talk, do you have any numbers or I know that's kind of an anecdotal from hearing it from just people that I talked to, but is there data on the real drop off on the willingness to take something like that versus?
You know, I don't have data at the hand, but generally speaking, in transit planning, just the draw and allure of a rail system it's just more alluring to riders as opposed to a standard bus. So that's one thing that we do consider when thinking ahead and evaluating public support for different modes for our ATC.
Okay, I appreciate that. I was just curious. I figured there probably is data on that somewhere. I just
I'm
don't
sure
know.
there is, yes, and I can get back to you
Okay.
if you'd like.
I'm very curious.
Okay.
Yes, that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Vice Chair. And is there any other comments? With that being said, let's be mindful that this service isn't just convenience, right? It's a lifeline. And I think that we need to be mindful in what is producing and how we can increment ridership. And we're seeing a huge influence of people coming into the north through this blue line, very important line. So thank you so much for that important information. We will see you back at the Board of Directors. Thank you. And then in the interest of staying within the, we're going to be moving item number 5 up per the recommendations. Sorry about that. I didn't mean for you to get up. Item number 5, I am very pleased to introduce our next presenter, Dan Pha. Dan Pha? No? Is he online?
We do have him online. Dan, if you could please accept the promotion request on Zoom, then you'll be able to present your item.
Dan is the Director of Transportation Planning and Analysis at the Orange County Transportation Authority. And he is here to provide an overview of efforts to address erosion along the Lausanne Rail Corridor and Orange County for their perspective. As our CEO mentioned, this is a key transportation route in Southern California. Welcome, Dan. Please take it away.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you again, and good afternoon, Chair and committee members. I'm Dan Fu from the Orange County Transportation Authority. So this afternoon, I'm going to be presenting to you an update on all that's been happening with respect to the coastal rail in South Orange County. Next slide, please. So there are really kind of 3 distinct bins of activities, if you will, that we have been working on. So the first one are the immediate needs. So there have been, through an identification, I'll get more into the process in a moment, 4 reinforcement areas, or what we like to also call hotspots, that we have identified along the 7-mile stretch of the rail line in South Orange County through the cities of Dana Point and San Clemente, that are in need of some sort of remedial actions. And then the second bin of activities is we have also undertaken a short and midterm planning study to look at also along that 7-mile stretch of what needs to be done to ensure that the rail line continues to operate. And I think many of you may be aware that what's not shown on this particular slide is that as far back as the fall of 2021, that had started a series of rail closures over a 3-year period due to various issues along the coastal rail line in 3 distinct areas. And then finally, the last sort of bin of activities is looking at some sort of long-term solutions for the 7-mile stretch of the coastline through South Orange County. And OCTA, along with the regional agencies, had requested a couple years back for the state, in this case CalSTA, to actually take the lead on that, and they have agreed to actually take the lead on the long-term solutions, and that potentially could involve some sort of a realignment to an inland alignment, kind of similar to what I understand SANDAG is working on with respect to the Del Mar realignment project. Next slide, please. So for the next couple of slides, I won't go into too much details, just at a high level, as I mentioned, it's basically 7 miles of the critical rail line in South Orange County, starting in the north. As you can see, that's basically at milepost 200.1, that is within the city of Dana Point's limits. And then as you proceed onto the bottom graphic, that's where there's the demarcation between the city of Dana Point and San Clemente. And really the hotspots that have been identified that are in need of immediate actions are actually all located within roughly about a 3-mile stretch, all within the city of San Clemente. Next slide, please. If you can, oh, thank you. And for this particular slide, this is all within the city of San Clemente, so it just shows the major landmarks as you approach the city of San Clemente. For instance, the city beaches as well as the pier. There are, I would like to note, 2 Metrolink stations located within the city of San Clemente. There's the North Beach as well as the pier stations, and as you proceed further south, there's San Clemente State Beach. Cypress Shore on the bottom graphic, in fact, was the subject of where the first landslide occurred back in fall of 2021. And then there's the famous Trussos Surf Beach in San Diego. That's right at the border between Orange County and San Diego. Next slide, please. So in terms of the 4 reinforcement areas or hotspots that I touched on a moment ago, on the right, you see a graphic with respect to where they have been identified. So it corresponds with the table of the 4 areas. You can see that areas 1 and 2 are on the seaward side, and it lists the mileposts for the rail line as well as what the challenges are and the potential solutions. I would note that we are very much at a planning phase with this information. So, things are subject to change in terms of ultimately what the solutions would be. And so just for a geographic bearing, you can see 3 of those areas are north of the San Clemente Pier, and then one of the areas is actually south of the San Clemente Pier. So area number 3 is the inland area where we have seen previous bluff failures as recent as the beginning of 2024 with the Mariposa Point bluff failure that occurred in the beginning of 2024, and I believe that lasted through about March when rail service resumed. And then finally, area number 4 is adjacent to San Clemente State Beach, and it's the area just north of where, if you recall from the previous graphic, Cypress Shore, where one of the earlier emergencies occurred. Next slide, please. So just a quick overview of areas 1, 2, and 4. Again, these are all challenges we have identified on the seaboard side. Concepts that are being considered are those that are listed on there, including but not limited to additional, or not so much additional, but riprap replacement due to the lack of beach. A lot of the riprap that had already been in place have been pulled out, so therefore exposing the rail line should there be high tide and king tide events. And then engineer revetment, and then what goes along with these engineering solutions, what we call, we also are including sand nourishment for both areas 1 and 2, as well as for area number 4. Next slide, please. And then in terms of the sand source delivery, we had actually done quite a bit of a deep dive. There are effectively 3 potential methods to actually get sand to the area, and they include effectively trucking, rail, as well as even offshore dredging. I would like to note that due to the geography of the area, particularly in the southern portion of San Clemente, where vehicular traffic really cannot get to the area, it leaves us really with just 2 options, either rail or offshore dredging. And just as a note, the city of San Clemente and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers just completed a phase 1 of their sand nourishment project back in fall of last year, and that was via offshore dredging mechanism or method that they had utilized due to the large quantity that they were needing. And that's something that we're looking at as well in terms of the most effective and feasible mode of getting the sand to the area. Next slide, please. And then in terms of inland and offshore sand sources, the quantity of sand that we're looking at for what I'll call areas 1 and 2 would be somewhere around 240,000 cubic yard. And then in area 4 would be somewhere roughly between 240 to about 300,000 cubic yard. And given the large quantity, again, to put it in context, what the Army Corps of Engineers partnered with the city on last year was roughly about 250,000 cubic yard via an offshore dredge method in terms of mining the sand. And in terms of looking at inland sand sources, we have looked at a number of inland sand sources that you can see on this particular table. Many of them are actually pretty far inland, and so it would require trucking, or conversely, in the case of Prado Dam, where there is a rail line, there's a possibility of providing the transport via rail. But I would note that there are challenges with respect to the transport via rail, because we would need some sort of a passing siding, for instance, that does not currently occur up in the Prado Dam area. And then the challenge down in San Clemente is it's single track. There's really no opportunity for any sort of passing siding due to geographic constraint. Then it would in effect put the rail line out of service for an extended period as we would have to unload the sand. So those are all the logistical challenges that we have been looking at over the last year or so. Next slide, please. So moving on to area number 3, that's the inland challenge. So I mentioned this, the photo you see in the in the left-hand corner is the subject of the Mariposa Point pedestrian bridge failure that occurred back in January of last year. So there was roughly about a 2-month failure that occurred with the debris coming into the track. It's not there since we had removed the debris and put up the temporary catchment wall. But you can imagine all of that debris from the inland slope had gone onto the track, and it was out of service for roughly 2 months while we were working with Metrolink to actually put in the temporary catchment wall, and that's what it currently looks like today. I would note that there's still movement of the earth, as that approximately 12-foot high catchment wall has been largely filled up. And so that's something that we're carefully monitoring, as well as working closely with Metrolink to make sure that it doesn't topple and create additional operational issues. Next slide, please. And then in terms of the permitting processes, one of the challenges that we have been facing is in terms of looking at, there are a variety of permits that are needed, including from the Coastal Commission, from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, as well as State Lands Commission, as well as the Regional Water Quality Control Board. And one of the challenges is having to look at it from a standard process versus an emergency process. So without getting too much into the details, the standard process in a nutshell takes quite a bit of more time in terms of the project development process. If you think about sort of the design, bid, build process, that typically takes many, many months or even years to get to where you need to, as opposed to the emergency process, particularly with the Coastal Commission, where the work can begin immediately, and then we would have the ability, as we had in the past with the emergency actions, to actually lead out design build contracts to seek the remedial action actions immediately. Next slide, please. So in terms of next steps for the priority projects, we're looking at completing the project approval environmental document phase. And then we're going to continue to explore and coordinate with the state and federal regulatory agencies. I named them just a moment ago, for instance, Coastal Commission, State Lands Commission, as well as the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and then looking at ways to streamline the permitting opportunities. And then we're going to also look at ways to also get sand into the area and looking at partnership opportunities, whether it's with the county parks, the state, and or the city and others. Next slide, please. So now the next series of slides are on the planning study. So what I just went through are the 4 immediate kind of reinforcement areas that we need to take action on as we speak. And then these are more the short and midterm part of the short and midterm planning study. So what's on the left-hand side, you can see we're looking at solutions that ultimately would get us upwards of a decade and then upwards of even several decades while we're studying the potential, working in partnership with the state to study the potential and feasibility of relocating this coastal rail line to an inland alternative. And we begin this endeavor back in late 2023. We're in the midst of the study where this past February, I had gone to the OCTA Board of Directors to give him an update on some of the upcoming slides that I'll be going over. So the study is expected to be completed sometime in the early part of 2026. Study area includes a 7-mile stretch of the coastline in Orange County between the cities of Dana Point and San Clemente all the way to the Orange-San Diego County line. Next slide, please. So in terms of the menu of solutions, we're very early in the planning process. So right now we're really looking at the menu of solutions. So we kind of bin them into sort of 3 buckets, looking at challenges on the inland side, what we call the bluff side. And then all of those are potential solutions that we're looking at. And then we're looking at beach side solutions, which is basically on the seaward side of the rail line, and then finally on the rail itself, what are things that can be done to make the rail line more resilient? Next slide, please. So in terms of how we broke up the 7-mile planning study, we call them typical sections. There happens to be 7 typical sections. You can see that in terms of what the typical sections in effect are just similar land use types. So you can see here under typical sections 1 and 2, you can see kind of the schematic schematic drawings on the bottom of each graphic, whether it's typical section 1 or 2. For the existing conditions, you have, for instance, when you're looking at the profile, you have the bluff on the inland side. In this case, it's separated by Coast Highway, and then you have the rail line, and then to the west of the rail line, there are some existing development, whether it's residential under typical section 2 or a parking lot, and then you have some existing riprap and then a beach further to the west. So in terms of solutions, not a lot of solutions that are needed here, particularly in terms of looking at what can be done to make the rail line more resilient. Those are some of the one of the listed ones for the beach side is watershed modifications to basically improve the sand supply that we can partner with others in the region. And then as far as the rail line is concerned, what this particular item, alternative materials, really mean is to basically make the signals and the any of the rail facilities more resilient to the salinity, to the coast, to the seawater. So that you'll see is kind of a common theme that's going to occur for all 7 typical sections. Next slide, please. Typical section 3, you can see that there is a parking lot, the rail line, and then there's riprap to the west of, and then the beach. In terms of improvements that we can look at to shore up or protect the rail line, those are listed on here. And then again, I mentioned this in terms of the rail line, you'll see that common denominator for all 7 of the typical sections. Next slide, please. This is typical sections 4 and 5. This area tends to be more of the critical areas in terms of some of the challenges we've seen over the last handful of years. So you can see there are quite a bit of recommendations that we're looking at in terms of what can be done to make the rail line more resilient, whether we're looking at beachside improvements or bluffside or even the rail line. Next slide, please. And then in terms of typical section number 6, not a whole lot is being recommended here, primarily because there are buffers for the railroad track. Again, everything is being looked at from the lens of making the rail line more resilient. So in this particular case, not a whole lot that's being recommended other than what you see that's listed for the bluff side as well as for the rail. Next slide, please. This is the final typical section, number 7. You can see looking at there is a bluff that is to the east of the track along with the trail. So there are some challenges, but having said that, there are also challenges on the beach side, which there are some recommendations that are being considered for the beach side improvements. And then there's also the rail. Next slide. So in terms of key risk and challenges, just knowing that there's been quite a bit of emergencies that's occurred since 2021, and then we went ahead and identified 4 additional hotspots that are under imminent threat, that are in need of immediate actions. Undertaking the planning study for the short and midterm, there's always the risk for potential bluff failures as well as coastal erosion issues. So we're very much mindful of that as we're going through the project development process. I would note that this is a planning study. We're still going through the planning process, and then there's also going to be the public outreach process to gain public feedback on what else we should be looking at. And then obviously none of these concepts have been vetted at this time, and then there's no funding for subsequent phases for any of these concepts. So that's something that we're going to need to work carefully with our partners on, as well as looking at state and federal funding opportunities. So next slide, please. So in terms of next steps for this planning study, I mentioned that we're going to need to go out to the public sometime in the springtime timeframe to seek public input on these draft alternative concepts that I went over. We're going to have a couple of meetings. One is going to be in person, the other one's going to be virtual. And then we're going to look to refine these concepts and then come back to our board of directors sometime in the summer timeframe and report back on the public input process as well as the further refinement process. And then at such time, we're going to be looking to prepare a draft and final feasibility study report, which is going to be the mid 25 to about the mid 26 timeframe. And then at such time, we're going to basically initiate the preliminary engineering phase, which is the project approval environmental document phase, and then we'll get into the environmental studies phase as well. But in the meantime, we have kept the regulatory agencies, namely the Coastal Commission and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, abreast of what we're doing so that they are aware of, even though it's a planning study, there's still a sense of urgency in terms of trying to move as fast as we can within the context of the planning and the project development processes. And again, funding is always key in terms of making anything a reality. So as we get into the subsequent phases, we want to make sure the whole suite of potential solutions are going to be broken up into kind of a high, medium, and lower priority so we can make sure to move along those that are high priority. Next slide, please. So that concludes my remarks. Happy to answer any questions.
We appreciate you and the time. And at this point, I'm going to open it to public comments. Francesca, do we have any?
Thank you, Chair. We have 2 public comments. Allegedly, Audra will be first, followed by Blair Beekman.
Is it? Oh, there we go. Okay. Yes, this is interesting. I'm wondering, so it's saying that $305 million of funds have been secured. I'm wondering where that's going to go. And it seems a little bit premature to secure funds when you don't even really know what you're going to need it for. Because they could potentially be doing something like we're doing here, which is moving the tracks off the bluff and inland. So, I mean, that's going to be something that's going to be significant. I mean, I feel like all of these these are like, I don't even know, some of these people here might not even be here to see this into fruition, because it takes such a long time. And I feel like what happens is we wait till there's an emergency before we start acting on something. And then it's like, oh my gosh, we got to take these emergency measures when this could be something that was potentially mitigated quite a while ago. It's like we kind of watch stuff happen, and then, you know, as soon as you got to close it and stuff, we're not planning ahead. And I feel like it tends to waste money, because even if you secure funding now, depending on when any of this gets to actually come into fruition, the money isn't going to be the same value. So you potentially will need more and more and more money to even get these done. And then when we're doing things like sand nourishment, I mean, I just feel like that's such a waste. Like every time you're going to be bringing in a truck or a train and then putting the sand there, it's going to be washing into the ocean. Like, will you ever be able to keep up with that? Is it even feasible? Is it a waste of money that could be spent on something else? It just seems like it's just sad to see that these things, because this is dangerous for people. You know, like if something actually really bad and devastating happened, and it's because people aren't taking care and doing what needs to be done, when it needs to be done, we wait until it's an absolute necessity, and then it costs the people more money. And we just do these studies. It takes such a long time. And so, yeah, I mean, we'll see how this goes, and if they're going to even try and go underground and you know, potentially take people from their homes. This project seems just neglectful.
Thank you. Our final speaker on this item will be Blair Beekman. You can go ahead.
Hi, Blair Beekman. There's only 2 public commenters. Thank you for allowing us 2 minutes public comment time. Yeah, this is really interesting. You talked about Lausanne rail issues at the board of directors meeting earlier today. It's awesome that you're having someone here from Orange County talk about their view on the on you know, the coastal rail and its needs. But I just thank you immensely that he's here, and it'll be nice to see him again in the summertime, and I hope he can be here often. How we can bring in Riverside County and desert counties as well into this process. I hope you could be doing that too. I'm interested how I've been trying to learn how to parse, you know, the different needs of rail through the Lausanne corridor for our future. Passenger rail will be important. There's freight rail that I'm hoping we can talk more about making it from East County, and that's more of a regular conversation. High-speed rail, I'm not quite sure where that's at, but I think the future of military rail will be using these bluff and rail issues. And so, you know, it'll be difficult to continuously maintain rail along the bluff. So I guess it's the idea that military use will be minimal, and that will be the concentration of how to talk about the future of bluff issues and rail is through military purposes. Is that the reasoning? I'm not sure, but that's my guess at this time. Yeah, I'm a bit confused about the double rail planning that's been years in planning, that is going to be some construction in the upcoming year that I hope that you can, Mario talked about it at today's meeting, that at the first part of next year, it's only going to be, you know, environmental planning, but by the end of next year, you could be constructing things. Is that proper? I wanted to ask.
Thank you. Your time has expired. That concludes the public comments.
Thank you, Francesca. And at this time, I'm going to open it up to our board members for any questions or comments.
Super brief. Yeah, just
Go ahead, Vice Chair.
I just want to thank you for the presentation. Oceanside and the North Coastal area is so extremely connected to the Orange County through this Lausanne corridor. We every time these disruptions happen, and they tend to they're not small disruptions. These are the kind of disruptions that really set people off for long periods of time. It undermines the confidence that folks have in our system to use it as a planning agent for their day-to-day needs. And then obviously disrupts the economic mobility between our cities and the northern areas, which is really vital. So I appreciate the update on this project. We also understand how challenging it can be sometimes to work with the Army Corps of Engineers, and you know, looking at ways to use your beaches to protect that rail line is critical. But I mean, it really does, it's a tough task ahead of you. So thanks for taking it on and thanks for sharing your progress with us. We really appreciate it.
Go ahead.
Thank
Riverside
you.
County.
Yes, Riverside County. I want to thank you because I see Cabazon on there about sand. Come on down. We got plenty of it. Plenty of sand. Dirt so you can help on the beaches.
I love your energy. Never leave us. Anyone else? Comments, questions? Well, with that, we want to thank you, Dan, for taking the time and with this informative presentation. And we'll see you again soon, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I do have to mention that we're going to have to move item 4 and 6 to our next meeting. We have a hard stop at 3:30. Otherwise, they're going to take the chairs under us because they're going to start moving. As was mentioned, this is the last meeting in this building. So we're just going to end it with this item. And the next Borders Committee meeting is scheduled for Friday, April 25th. And at 1:30 p.m. Before we finish, I just want to take this opportunity to remind you that May will be National Bike Month, and we will celebrate with several activities, including some pit stops. Also, for the record, this will be, like I mentioned, the last meeting, and we're very grateful to this building. I mean, for over 15 years, I've been coming. I know many of you, well, not as much as Santee, right? That he came almost with the pillars, but you know,
Ouch.
we already gave him a hard time in the morning. Well, I want to conclude and adjourn and thank everyone for their time at this, coming to this meeting. And we want to
Sure.
see you all again in the next one. Yes, Supervisor
So
Escobar.
before we close, thank you, Mario, for pointing it out that this is the final meeting of being 35 years. I haven't been here 35 years, like Mr. Minto, for example.
Wow.
But, I think I've been here maybe 6 to 7 plus or minus. I do want to thank the current chair. I was a chair for the past year or 2 years, I can't remember. And I missed a few meetings, and I want to thank the chair, who was my vice chair back in the day, for helping me out and taking the bull by the horn and running a few of those meetings. So I appreciate her, and I appreciate SANDAG for now naming her the current chair. Congratulations, and thank you.
Much love all around. So thank you everyone for coming, and we'll see you next meeting in the new building.